Good afternoon, you guys. Welcome back to Spillin' It.
Good afternoon. We are going to introduce Megan Miller. Funny enough, we went to high school together.
Sure did.
Funny enough.
Cambridge
Blue
ISANI.
jackets.
Whoop,
Yep.
whoop. But she is a licensed clinical psychologist with Minnesota Mental Health Clinic, and we have the pleasure of having her today to answer a bunch of questions you guys have sent in, as well as talk about ADHD. We'll see where it goes. Lots of topics to cover.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many topics, but let's start with how you got, like, why you got into it. What made you want to do this, like, as a job?
Yeah, it's a fair question because not everybody chooses it.
Yeah.
Ironically enough, like I knew in high school
You did.
I wanted to be a therapist. So Mr. Wieselman, our
Mhm.
track coach, I was in his chemistry class. I enjoyed chemistry. I apparently was doing fine at it.
Yeah.
And he had some students who were younger that weren't doing so hot, and he wanted somebody to tutor them. And I remember that he had told me, you know, it wasn't that they don't know it. It's more of like motivation or study habits or things like that. I couldn't tell you their names, but I vividly remember having conversations with them where we were trying to just motivate them, and they were telling me a little bit about their lives. And like, I just kind of fell in love with the whole concept of just helping people through life.
Yeah.
You know, I coached for a really long time, and there's some parallels there too, where just like everything comes into sports, all your feelings, all your kind of troubles, if you will.
Yep.
Yes.
And I found myself in that role a lot as a coach. And at the time with that, you know, we were deciding college and all of that. Really the singular path to being a therapist was to be a psychologist, which was, you know, signing up for a lot of school.
Yeah.
It was,
How long was that all together?
so altogether, you have to get your bachelor's degree, which is a 4-year degree. And then it's 4 additional years of academics.
Oof.
Yeah. And then another year of a full-time internship.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So 9 years all in.
Yeah. I mean, thank goodness. Here's my shameless plug for
Yeah.
PSEO.
Yeah. There you
True.
go.
I shaved that down by, I think, like 2.5 years because of
Is
Oh, wow.
that
PSEO.
only a Minnesota thing?
Apparently.
PSEO? Because
Serious?
So I
Yeah.
heard it on a podcast that they were like, that's not common in other states. And I was like, I thought that was, I mean, obviously we all just grew up in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yep.
And PSEO was, a lot of kids did it.
Mhm.
And I just thought everyone did it. So if you are in Minnesota and you're going to graduate and you have a long whatever, go
Yeah.
to PSEO. It does knock down time.
And saves a lot,
of money.
Oh my gosh, so much money.
Yeah.
So much money. So can you describe the difference? Because we asked on Instagram kind of questions for you, and we were kind of talking about the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist.
Mhm.
So can you kind of explain?
Yeah. So a psychologist and a psychiatrist are both doctoral level. So I have my doctorate. However, I don't prescribe meds. So
Got it.
my doctorate, there's 2 doctorates usually therapists will receive. Either it's called a PhD, which is the traditional one, or a PsyD, which is a more clinical degree. It's a newer doctorate.
Okay.
But those who go get their PhD, a good portion of people who get their PhD in psychology are really research based. So they're, you know, all of our fellow psychologists, you know, I'm sure they're doing lots and lots of really good research post-COVID, for example,
Yeah.
on how that all affected us and
Yeah.
the adaptations that came from there. A PsyD, on the other hand, we still had research elements. I still had to do a dissertation and all of that, but our academics were much more focused on the clinical piece of it. So
Okay.
the kind of art and science of therapy, you know, expertise of human behavior, and then really taking the research and actually trying to like bring it to life in our communities. So I went
Yeah.
to school, their model at the time was called a local clinical scientist. And what they were essentially trying to create in us is read the research, understand how they did the research, and then how do you then apply that to that person who's sitting in front of you, right? Because a lot of research is done in a lab, and
Yeah.
you know, they manipulate the conditions and all of that, and it's like, so how do we take that learning and actually help the person right in front of you?
Yeah.
The psychiatrists, on the other hand, they have their MD. They're a medical doctor that's
Okay.
specialized in psychiatry, and they they do kind of the art of prescribing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of nuance and types of meds, dosing. They obviously have to tweak things for age and condition.
So they can diagnose you and give you meds?
Correct.
And you diagnose, but you don't give meds?
No meds.
Got it.
Yep.
Got
Some
it.
states are allowing prescribing rights to psychologists.
Yeah.
It's a pretty controversial topic, though.
Oh,
Got
we
it.
love a controversial topic.
Might have to be a follow-up episode.
I know.
Right?
I was like, we have so many questions that I don't even think we can get it all in this episode.
Yeah.
But let's start with I feel like we should we just start with kids and phones first?
Yeah.
Just
Jump right in.
Jump right in.
Lots of strong
Speaking of
opinions.
controversial topics.
Yeah. So we have been discussing this because Gray is 10 and he is like one of the only kids in his class that doesn't have a phone
Yeah.
yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's always constantly asking, and I'm like, you need to wait at least until middle school. I got my first phone when I was like 16. But it was like one of those, you couldn't even really text. You had to do the like A, B, C.
Yeah.
to
It's like the Nokia.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Flip phone.
Yeah. But I would love to get into it and your thoughts and all of that
Yeah.
with kids and phones and ages and all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our generation actually is the last generation to be raised through our kind of formative years without smartphones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So we all probably got our first phone at, I don't know, high school, 16, 17 years old.
Yep.
And they
College.
were literally like
Yeah.
college.
Well, Ethan's an
I was
exception
sheltered.
to the rule.
It's okay, Ethan.
You didn't have a TV at
No,
your house.
anti-technology over here.
So, yep.
Yeah. Well, you weren't missing much because really all you could do
Right.
is like call people.
Yeah.
Listen, I had some sick tree forts. So I
You
gotta say.
you can make a good fort, but you also do a lot of really handy things that you learned because you
Mhm.
didn't
Yeah.
have a phone and you were bored, so
Yep.
you did stuff.
Well, and the important thing, like that actually is a really important point because your brain developed in a way that like you learn all of those skills, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but nonetheless, we still got our phones post most intense formative years, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
that adolescent period is, the brain is just like really booming.
When does that end? Like the
Um,
age wise, I guess.
Well, so there's actually our biggest burst of brain development is birth to 5,
Okay.
right? And it's
Mhm.
just like, and I mean, think about it. Like these kids are born, you're in this new world, you're taking in all this stimuli for the first time, you're walking, you're learning to talk. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot to do in
Yep.
those first 5 years.
A lot.
Right. And then the second burst, you're really working on your kind of primitive functions in your brain up till about 16.
Mm.
And then when you get to about 16 years old, your prefrontal cortex, which is like, right, I always call it's the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to flash in and out, like the lights are coming on in the room.
Mhm.
That's when you start to see your teenager like, oh, that was really mature, or that was a really good decision, or you like avoided that risky thing and didn't think that you were untouchable. And that can last well into your 20s.
Okay.
That burst of development, and there's a ton of identity stuff going on at that time. But you're starting to get higher order thinking, really good decision making. You see a lot of creativity burst in that time frame. You start to see kids like forward thinking, right? So now you start them seeing like making their life plans and
Yeah.
like, oh, well, if I want to be a psychologist, well, I have to think about that. Like I'm going to have to do this
Yeah.
and I'm going to have to go to school, and where would I go to school, and like what are the requirements?
Yeah.
And
Austin was talking about that in like the 3rd grade.
Yeah.
He was talking about college, and I was like, I don't remember ever thinking about college at that age.
Neither.
yeah.
do
Was it associated with sports? Because our son is like, I'm going to go to North Carolina because
Yes.
something about North Carolina. and
Yes.
something sports
Definitely. But
related.
it was like U of M, like colleges that I was like, I didn't even think about college
Yeah.
in elementary school. But
Yeah.
none of the other kids were like
Did you
that,
guys
but-
know U of M is really like, isn't it like University of Miami for the rest of the nation except for us in Minnesota?
Really?
It's University
What?
of Minnesota. Yeah.
People say the U of
Yeah.
M is the University of Minnesota of
I think it's
Miami.
Miami.
Like it's more the U of M
oh, I suppose
abbreviations are
Yes.
more recognized
that
as.
makes sense.
yeah.
But there's
Nobody-
there's University of Michigan. There's so many.
But do they call
Yeah.
that the U of M?
no.
they
I don't think the University of Michigan. I think it's Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember, so my husband is not from Minnesota. And I said something about the U of M, and he's like, why are you talking about the University of Miami? And I was
You're
like,
like, I'm not. How dare you?
Minnesota.
talking about the one and only U of M, everybody. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't prevent younger kids from like making those types of references, but truly seeing that sequential planning and taking, action on that usually is 16 and above. So when it comes to phones, that's really what the discussion is starting to bubble up around.
Yeah.
So when we had our phones, again, the capabilities were completely different.
Right.
And the biggest change is we didn't have internet at our fingertips.
Right.
Right. We were talking about this earlier. Like you wanted to go on the internet.
Oh my God.
In our day, that was a 15-minute commitment just to get on.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And then if your mom wanted to get on the phone, you were kicked right off.
Yep.
No doubt. And in Cambridge, my goodness.
Oh gosh. Did you even have internet at your house?
I mean, maybe towards the end of high school.
Yeah.
But I mean, the computer we had was ancient for that time.
Yes.
And it was like enough to like type up a Word document.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
save it on a floppy disk.
Exactly.
A floppy disk. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
It's like the thickness of a Polaroid photo. Just
yeah. 100%. So yeah, like our experience with internet was just so
different.
vastly different.
Yeah.
Did we have Google?
We had Ask Jeeves. Remember that?
oh my gosh.
Yes.
Isn't that weird? I was thinking about that
wild.
the other day and I was like, Rachel, do you remember Ask Jeeves? That was before Google.
That's
And
wild.
weird-
AOL was that?
AOL was like your email, but then you had the like AIM, which was the instant messaging.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Which, and then we were
You had
talking
to have
about
a
chat
CD-ROM.
rooms. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I feel like that's how early college, that's how I stayed in touch with people from high school was AIM.
Oh,
or
yeah.
even you
Mhm.
maybe, because I don't think, to be honest, I don't think I had a cell phone until maybe my first year of college, maybe mid-college. I can't remember.
Which
but-
still wouldn't have been out of the norm
Yeah.
at
right.
that time.
And to be honest, I think I was on your family's plan.
You were.
Because my parents didn't get cell phones till maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah. 5 years ago.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
It's just a workaround.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah. So now we have these phones, and what the data really shows is you can. There's a book called The Anxious Generation.
I have heard of that book.
Yeah, by Jonathan Haidt. Really good. If you want a shortcut to the book, he's been on a couple podcasts that have been really good, like summaries, like
There's a-
Armchair Expert. And,
Oh, okay.
We'll
I've-
find some and put them in the links.
Yeah. He's on, I added it on my Audible
Mm,
because I like listening to books. And so
Mhm.
that's one I think I'm going to listen to.
yeah, it's a good one. So he talks about a few different things that are kind of all coalescing into one major problem. But one of the things he shows is the data of, for example, adolescent girls and the rise of anxiety and depression. We know that there's been a population increase in reported anxiety and depression amongst adolescent girls.
Mhm.
And so he takes that, and it's a graph that he calls a hockey stick, which is pretty rare to
Yeah.
see in the research, to see like a true like bam.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, well, what caused that? Like clearly something happened,
Yeah.
right, to create such a sharp increase. And he overlays the graph with when the iPhone was invented and then when social media was invented. And it's just like,
Wow.
it's like you can't unsee it.
Lines
right.
up.
Right.
And so now you're kind of, okay,
Now what?
well, those things seem to be fairly related.
yeah.
And so now we're kind of in the phase of this, like we have the data, we have the research, we know that it's problematic. You see it, ironically, all over social media.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what do you do?
Right.
Like, what decisions do you make?
yeah.
Both for yourself and as a parent, I would say. I think the other thing that in subsequent interviews that this particular author talks about is he's like, I focus so much on social media and mental illness, which didn't give quite enough attention to two other things, which is how attention and concentration as a whole is coming down even in adults.
Yeah.
Because of the like TikTok doom scroll.
Yeah.
Mhm. It's like
Um,
15-second videos. If you
yeah.
don't hook them right away, they're like, I'm bored.
Yep.
Yep.
And you're like, nobody knows how to be bored anymore.
No.
Like, I'll be like, just, you too bad, Gray. You got to look out the window.
Figure it
like,
out.
You know,
What?
I remember watching, like being in a car and we didn't have a phone to be like on or a movie to watch. And I would watch the raindrops on the window. And then I would see if one would fit, like win or the race.
Yeah.
You know,
Or what shape were they?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shapes of the clouds.
Creativity.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. We played a game when we were kids. All I remember is called Dimensions. I don't really know the rules.
Mm.
Don't really know like what
I
that
remember,
was, but
I can picture it. Dimensions.
yeah.
Mm.
I don't, or Hotbox. Remember that one? Where you like pitch you threw a baseball back and forth and you had to try and get to the other side before the baseball got there and then you'd switch out. So I had brothers. That's pretty obvious now.
Oh, yeah. I didn't. I did not.
I had all brothers.
Like in
We
baseball.
played like Red Rover. And
Right
then
one.
when Ethan would come over, we'd be like, nope,
Yeah.
he'll kill us.
Just run through.
Right. And so you also think about, because one of the other impacts of this, of just screen time in general, is if you really think about how much you explored your neighborhood. So I was just driving one of our kids over to their grandparents' house. We were driving through the neighborhood that I grew up in. And he's an inquisitive kid. And he's like, how long has that McDonald's been there? And I'm like, well, it's been there since I was riding my bike around. And then I was showing you, I was like, that was the library. That was the Tom Thumb. We used to go get our, treats at. I had a friend who lived over there. And I'm looking at the, like the directions, right? And I'm like, I'm 2 miles from my house. Like, but that was normal.
Yeah.
Right.
So you think about the skills that are needed to do that. You need to have some sort of directional awareness. You need to be able to like understand, like, don't cross the road when it's a red light here, like lock up your bike, which I didn't do one time. And my dad saw it. He took my bike from the library and I thought someone stole it.
Teach her a lesson.
Oh
It
my
was
gosh.
Super powerful life lesson.
Yep.
Well, he didn't get me one of the cute purple bike locks. I had like a heavy duty can't cover it bike lock.
Yep.
And that was very embarrassing.
You're like, well, somebody can steal it.
Yep.
Right. But either way, like you think about all the different skills you learned just in the act of like being out and about.
Yeah.
And now they're showing kids are spending up to 7 hours a day on screens. And that's not including school.
Oh.
So you think about in school, they all have their Chromebooks or different schools have iPads or they have the smart boards now. And so you think about just like how much of their day is in front of a screen in totality, regardless of what they're doing on it.
Right.
And how much that's not exploring. It's not being handy. It's not being social.
Yeah.
It's not being out in the sunlight, especially in this state. My goodness, we have like winter's a real thing here.
Yeah.
Yep.
We need vitamin D. All
Right.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a couple different effects. One, it's what screens do to you. It's the impact social media has on you. It's the fact that the internet is kind of a scary place.
Yeah.
And we're not teaching our kids how to navigate that.
Yeah.
But then it's also, you're more sedentary. You're not as social because, watching something on YouTube or even having like a Zoom call with somebody is not the same as being in the same room. We've shown that. We've proven it, right? Your brain reacts differently. And so they're not being social. They're not, I mean, I'd be interested to know, because I find this fascinating. Like Austin, would he be able to pick up the phone and like call somebody?
Yeah, he is Ethan Mini.
Yeah.
But Nevaeh,
Right? Like the skill of just
because she,
Yeah, he's Mr. Outgoing, like no problem. But
he'll go to the Y and, or to the gym or the pool. He'll talk to people.
He's learning it through real interaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Gray and Nevaeh are more like, we'll stick to each other.
yeah, to your point with Nevaeh, like the last couple crushes that she's had were like, have you talked to him in real life? No.
Yeah.
Just through Snapchat.
Yeah.
I'm like, Nevaeh,
Yeah. Right?
go talk to
Right.
him.
Yeah.
But even like ordering a pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's a skill,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But you can do everything online now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, ordering pizza, I would rather order pizza online
Oh,
than call.
I
Ethan
still call.
immediately is calling.
and you got to sit through the whole automated AI system to finally get to somebody, and it wastes time actually calling. But I still prefer it. But I'm also like been in sales for so many years.
Yeah.
That's another piece that I'm like, that piece will always be more powerful person to person.
Yeah.
Than
Yep.
using
AI,
AI, Chat GPT, whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. And like, so we moved to a new house, and my husband and I had kind of this aha moment because we're unpacking. Of course, our oldest was bored.
Yep.
We're not big screen utilizers, so we're like, there's a whole world in front of you. It's like a brand new world. We just moved. Like, go explore. And our previous house was on a busy road. And so we didn't often, and he was younger, so we didn't often let him just kind of go ride your bike and see what you see and come back.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, how will I know how to get back? And we were like, that's a solid question. Like,
you're like,
use your directional abilities.
you
Right?
have to
Like-
remember.
Yep.
Well, even yesterday, this is a perfect example. Ethan's mom was like, how do you get to Nevaeh's dance recital? And Ethan's like, Mom, I sent you the address, but still she can't look it up on her phone because she doesn't have the internet. So he had to audibly just be like, you take a left here. She still went to the wrong school, but that reminds me of just that time. Like you have to figure it out. You go there and you're like, but even I was thinking as I was on Wednesday, like my phone broke, and so Ethan brought it in. I didn't have my phone, and I don't work on Wednesdays anyways. But I was like, how long has it been since I've like driven without my phone?
Yeah.
And I saw somebody say on the internet one day, it was like on Instagram or something, like, well, what if something happens? You can't go without your phone. And I'm like, I used to do it all the time.
What did we?
All the time. And I'm like, it's actually quite freeing to be like, no one can talk to me. Nobody can call me. Nobody's going to text me. I'll just meet you at the game.
Yep.
And then you tell each other about your day after versus like, forever updating, even though that's literally my job and how Ethan and I talk. But
there was no updating parents like your whereabouts after school. You just said, I'll be home by curfew.
When it's dark.
When it's dark.
Yeah.
Or you had to go find a landline and call them.
You're at your neighbor's house and your parents had to call your neighbors. Like send court home.
Yep. Yep.
So what do you like with all this statistics and all of that? Like what is the best like recommendations and tips and stuff?
Yeah. I think, and some of what I love about this field is like, we actually really can bring it down to very simple tactics, right? So the first would be, there really truly is not a place for social media. I would say the data says until 18.
Yeah.
Realistically in our society, knowing how much communication, even some community emerges from that. Like, I tried to get off Facebook, but the truth of the matter is like our kids' school solely communicate like the parent groups and like the events and stuff like through Facebook. So it's like, I was part of a gym. Their sole communication was Facebook. So, and if you can prevent your children from getting on social media till at least 16, brain development wise, you can be more assured that they have some critical thinking skills starting to show up that at least can help them navigate that space a little bit better. They're just so vulnerable before then. And social media, although I will say you've created this nook of social media that's actually like a very safe, non-judgmental space, which I think we need more of. And I think we would see less harm if more of it was like that. But the truth of the matter is like the majority of it is not like that.
Right.
And so there's just really no place for kids.
Does that include YouTube Shorts?
So YouTube Shorts, yes, in the sense that those short bursts of videos are really actually very overwhelming for our dopamine systems. And it can really affect our attention and our concentration where we, even as adults, we can't focus for a long time.
No wonder my ADHD is worse. It's just these short little videos.
Right? Do like a Instagram detox and see if it gets better. It would be a fascinating like personal experiment.
That would be. Yeah.
So, however, social media, if you can hold off till 16, one of the recommendations in this particular book, which I thought was so well thought out, is if you can kind of collaborate with some other parents that your kids socialize with and you all kind of agree, like let's hold off. It really helps from your child feeling like odd man out. You know? And so then they feel like they still have a community. They're not, the uncool kid who like doesn't have the cell phone or
like you still there. I think parents they feel guilty that their kid is the only one who doesn't have a phone.
Yeah.
But like with Grayson, he's so much younger than Austin and Nevaeh.
Yeah.
That he feels left out no matter what. But I'm like, they never got a phone at your age.
Right.
Also. And you're only 10. Like you don't need to have a phone.
There's not a need.
You're not driving. You're not. He's in sports, but we're at all of his sports.
Right.
So, okay, what about Snapchat?
Oh,
I know.
So scary.
I know. Snapchat, I will say, Ethan and I have both like with the kids have gone through it, because it's such a weird thing that I hate.
Yeah.
But like, that's how they all in high school, that's all they all communicate.
Yeah. I think Snapchat gives us like a lure of like confidentiality.
Privacy.
Like it's, and it's just like, no.
It deletes after. And you're like,
Does it though?
Does it? Does anything on the internet delete? I also think about why do we want it to disappear? Right? Like all of a sudden, like maybe I'm giving myself permission to talk about or entertain conversations from other people, which is the one that really scares me.
Yeah.
That I might not otherwise, entertain, because then there's like no track record of it when we know that's not true, right? Because now there's this connection with this person who may or may not be harmful. I think that the thing about Snapchat is that I think a lot of kids do use that for primary communication, but there's just been a lot of proven, I guess, harm occurring on Snapchat. I just think some people who their goal is less than safe and maybe to target young kids for whatever reason, some more harmful than others. It's just happening a lot on Snapchat. Yeah. And there's just no way around it anymore. It's there. And my thing is, we need to start rallying as a parent group and saying, because it's very real for Nevaeh. Like if all of her friends are communicating on Snapchat and she exits the conversation, she's now like completely uninformed and like not part of the chatter. And so it's going to require kind of a rally from parents together to say, as a group, we're going to put a boundary up here with our kids. Yeah. And do so in a way that not any one person is left out. Right. Absence that, occurring, then it's a really in-depth conversation with your kids about why. Yeah. Why you're pulling it from them and how, trying to open up whether you're texting other parents to say, to keep Nevaeh in contact, or she's going to text them instead of Snapchat, whatever it might be. Right. Yep. We need to start parenting through this situation, because we can't expect our kids to navigate it on their own. Yeah. I mean, it's a great analogy to be like, your neighborhood, you knew it like the back of your hand and that's how you knew things. And then we're just like, here's the internet. Yeah. Best of luck. Yeah. Have fun. And then then all of a sudden you're looking through their phone and you're like, who are you talking to? They're like, I don't know. They just started talking to me. And you're like, wait. Yeah. How do you know them? But I mean, with us, we were very over the top, because I feel like Snapchat is such a scary app. You can see locations if you have that on. Yep. You're talking to people that you think are your age, but you're not. It's like, I remember back in the day when me and Rachel were like on the freaking chat rooms, and there was, they did the like, what's your age? What's your sex? What's your location? And then they said, send a picture. We're like, you first. And it was this old guy. And I remember it was back when the pictures would be like loading so slow. And it was like, we were all just sitting there. Yeah. And we saw a bald head and we were like, oh boy. And then we immediately got all freaked out because he was older and we were scared. And so we just like clicked out. But I'm like, if you think about it, it's just like Snapchat. These people that are like, oh, I'm 15 too. And then all they have to do is screenshot pictures from anywhere on the internet to pretend that that's who they are. Yep. Yeah. Yep. It's scary. Well, you think about, remember that show on, maybe it's still on MTV, Catfish? Yeah. Yes. Right? Or just the concept of catfishing. It's so plausible. Yeah. It's so accessible. It's so easy. Just like we would have never let our kids learn how to ride a bike without a helmet. Right. Ever. Or don't go, just hop on it, see what happens. Yeah. We're behind them going, okay. Yep. You can go now. We're coaching them, Yeah. When you cross the road, look both ways. Even when you think about how you set them up and launched them into kindergarten, right? Or you think of like socially, like I even saw on your Instagram, like you helping Austin ask a girl to prom, right? Like you're walking through it like en route, and they're learning things in that. But for whatever reason, we're very laid back when it comes to putting the internet in our kids' hands. And I think some of that is because it happens en route in school, right? Like they're obviously connected to the internet when they're at school, but there are controls there. hopefully.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the goal.
Like on their Chromebooks, they're like, oh, I can't look that up. You can't go on YouTube. You can't go on, like all that stuff is blocked on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you ever just go on YouTube and you go through kind of a tear of just clicking next video,
Yeah.
like you get to some creepy spots.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you think about you're on a road trip and now your kid has the iPad in the back. They're not watching the raindrops.
Right.
And they're just clicking and clicking. What is it that would inherently tell them to stop?
Yeah.
There's nothing. There's no built-in internal like safeguard unless it's something they've heard from you.
Right.
Right? If all of a sudden they get to a video that like has a lot of cursing or something
Mhm.
and you and your household have said, these are potty words and you shouldn't say, then yeah,
Mhm.
that guard would probably come up, but that again didn't happen naturally. It came from like
Right.
a conversation
Yeah.
in your house with your parents saying you shouldn't say those words.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And so I think we need to be way more hands-on. I am a big advocate of when kids are little, if they do have a phone or if they are on the internet, I can read your text messages.
Yeah.
Like if you're on my plan and I'm paying for that phone,
Yep.
Yeah.
like I can pop in there. We have one kid who does have a phone, and he kind of intermittently uses it, but I intentionally pick it up and read his text messages in front of him.
Mhm.
And I'll ask him questions about the conversations he's having with, he has like a soccer team group chat or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's because I want him to know that I'm watching. I want him to know that partly so that there's an agreement that if things cross the line,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
good. Like there could be consequences,
Yeah.
but also that I'm a resource so that if you get stuck
yeah.
in a conversation, like this is just an open thing. It's not
Mhm.
something that, we don't really lean into the concept of privacy at his age,
Mhm.
because he still needs us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I do it. I flip it open
Mhm.
right in front of him. No questions asked. And I think, we do the same thing with, if he's on the computer, we intentionally got a desktop that's in a common area of the home instead of
Yep.
laptops. We don't let them take
Yeah.
devices in their room, because they're young.
Yeah.
They're young and they don't know. And our kids' reactions to it, and if you have the conversation up front to say, this is why I'm doing it, this is what it's going to look like, these are kind of the rules in our house around this, they're not offended by it.
Right.
Right? It's just a natural step in the progression of their development of like, just like I have to be home by 6, but then when I turn 16, I get to be home at 8. And when I can drive, it's like,
yeah. Yeah.
it's just something that evolves.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think too, even with them being like, oh, well, everybody has a phone. I'm like, always like, well, I'm not their mom.
Yeah.
I say that all the
Mhm.
time.
You're not everybody.
I'm not their parent.
Yep.
Yep.
You're different.
Yep. You got
their
me.
parents can do what they're going to do, but it's
Yep.
different here. Like Austin just got a TV in his room
Mm-hmm.
and he's like going to be 18 in like 4 months,
Yeah.
5 months,
Yeah.
And I'm like, and he was like, yes, so excited.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you haven't had one. I mean, I don't love the thought of that in their room
Mhm.
because I don't want them isolated all the time.
100%.
You
Yeah.
know?
And that's what happens if their whole world can happen in the context of their 4 walls of their bedroom,
Yep.
Yeah.
or they've been conditioned to identify their bedroom as like a safe spot.
Yeah.
Right. And so I go to my safe place and I talk to my safe people, but then all of a sudden the internet starts introducing things, or I get myself into a natural ebb and flow of my emotions and I'm on a dip and I shut the world out.
Yeah.
And then I try to figure it out with myself, but my view is a little skewed because I may be feeling a little anxious or a little depressed or something.
Mhm.
And then we start to see like a real turtle shell effect. And then it gets just harder and harder to ask for help as
Yeah.
it keeps
Yeah.
progressing and keeps progressing. So
Mm.
yeah, I in those, before we get the prefrontal cortex online, the very front part of your brain that is all the kind of maturity and problem solving and complex critical thinking, I'm all about keeping them close and keeping an eye on things.
Good call. You got any questions,
point.
Heath, about that?
No, I think it's a good point. I think it obviously, like you said, comes all down to the parents
Mhm.
putting certain stipulations. If you are going to
Boundaries,
allow
I like to
screen-
call
yeah,
it.
boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a better word, like
Mhm.
a certain number of, I mean, they ask you on the questionnaire when you go to the doctor and the child visits, like
Mhm.
how often are they on screen time? How many hours a day? So I think putting in those, if you are going to allow it, putting in those stipulations to your
Mhm.
point, having it in a common area,
Yeah.
so you just got to be more purposeful
Mm-hmm.
as
Yeah.
parents to,
Yeah.
put the right boundaries in place.
There's two other interesting things. So one, just sheer amount of time is a problem. Social media is a problem. The gamification of everything, that everything is like either it's short and quick and these kind of quick bursts of it's hitting our reward center in our brain, but it's also like deteriorating it over time. For young boys, that's often the appeal, right? It's the video games and all of that. So that's not super great. I think right now the recommendation is no more than like 45 minutes a day. And I think it's 45 minutes three times.
Got it.
Got it.
I think the book, you'll have to fact check me on this. If I remember right, it was like 45 minutes a day, 3 days a week, maybe. Showed cognitive improvement, right? There are some good things that come out of video games. I mean, there's a lot of dexterity. You're using your brain in a different way. Like there's a lot of coding games, right? Which is like I don't understand it, but it looks really cool. And I'm very proud of people who know how to do that. But the other thing that has been shown to be a type of screen time that I think is like a really healthy way of engaging it is movies. Especially those, like, because you're sustaining attention. A movie's like 90 minutes long or so. And usually there's like character development. There's some sort of like moral wrestle and like,
plot line.
You see like these characters having to make decisions. So we started doing that with our kids a little bit, and we started pulling out some of the classics. Like, remember that movie Miracle?
Yes.
About the hockey team?
Yeah.
That was a big hit.
Grayson's favorite is The Sandlot.
Yeah.
Loves it. We watched, did you ever watch Angels in the Outfield?
Love that movie.
Oh,
love that movie.
I'm obsessed with
What
that.
did you just watch the other night? Little Big League?
Little Big League
with
with
the Minnesota Twins.
With the Twins. Oh, he loved that.
Remember the Titans?
Oh, yeah.
It's a good one.
Austin's favorite.
Yep.
So
if you're looking to like slowly transition your kids off of maybe an amount or a type of screen time, they're like, maybe that's not such a good idea. Like that's a really good replacement, or even like evolving TV shows, right?
Yeah.
So it's only, I don't know, 40 minutes or something at a time.
Because I mean, with Gray, he can actually he'll go on the TV and watch YouTube shorts.
Yep.
But I get annoyed of them because it's like, well, you never know what's going to pop up. Some are loud and some are swearing and some are like random.
Yep.
Or they have these like really annoying noises. And so I'm like, you have to watch a movie because I cannot with the like constant.
Or adults talking in annoying voices. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Shut
the
it
science
off.
ones are cool.
Yeah.
Our kids will watch those every month, but they seem to be longer.
So some of them are only like 15 seconds. And I'm like, dude, you got to watch something else.
Yeah. And that's where the attention and concentration is starting to
I've definitely noticed that with him, especially because he's just a very on-the-go kid.
Yep.
And then he's like, I'm bored. I'm like, it's okay. You can be bored.
Bored's actually like a really good skill.
Yeah,
it is.
It forces
Ethan,
you.
it's a really good skill that you should also develop. Are you?
Maybe put the vacuum down for just a minute.
Stop cleaning.
Stop cleaning for once. He can't. He sits down for like max 15 minutes. He's like, well, I better go do something.
Yep.
Like, well, we should talk about OCD. We got some OCD questions.
Yeah.
Didn't we?
Yeah.
Got to look at some of them. And ADHD, which I have a million questions about too.
Yeah. I think OCD I find to be, well, I see this happen a lot in just like the larger culture of we will use a lot of diagnosis language. I would say like, oh, that's so traumatizing. I'm so depressed. Whatever it might be. And it actually creates like a misunderstanding of what the clinical conditions are.
Right.
And it's also, I mean, I don't mean to ruin your day because you're really gonna overthink how you talk now after I say this.
I probably will.
There's a lot of inherent stigmatizing language that we use.
Yeah.
So like, wow, that's so crazy. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's nuts. It's all rooted in this concept of mental illness, and it's always in kind of like a negative connotation sort of thing, or like an exaggerated connotation.
Yep.
Yeah. I love exaggerating.
Yeah. I'll introduce you to other words. I've had to make this language shift myself because in the industry, it's very important. I don't use stigmatizing language.
As we grow up, like, don't you think too, like things that we said back in high school, we're like, oh my gosh, I would never say that nowadays.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's just switching.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a big, like, describe it. So I'll say a lot like, that's really wild. That must have been really intense. Or you just put the word felt in front of it. You must have felt really anxious, or I'm feeling really sad or mad or whatever it is. And then it keeps it, it's the same thing. Like instead of saying, oh, I have a schizophrenic aunt, right? That's like a very stigmatizing way of saying it.
Yeah.
My aunt has schizophrenia or has been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And so those little shifts are important.
Yeah.
I encourage everybody to try and make them because it helps chip away at the stigma, which keeps people. She's I have not.
I'll be like, she's crazy. Like, that's actually, I never thought of it that way. Or like even because it's like not something you actually think about until somebody says it. You're like, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. I remember the first time it was pointed out to me and I was like, but I don't know what words to use now.
Right.
Like, what are my replacement words going to be?
I'm going to have to think about that.
Maybe I just don't talk.
You'll find them. They'll come naturally.
Yeah.
Because now that I've said it, you won't be able to unhear it. And then, but that's the whole point of like awareness, right? It's like first you become aware of it and then you figure out how to like make the shift.
Right.
But it's important because a lot of people, when we're walking around, like naming people's behavior and like in a way that doesn't feel warm and fuzzy. And then you're telling me I have to go to the doctor and like tell them that it's actually true for me. Like that's a lot.
Well, and I think the main thing that I got from the questions just to ask you is like feeling judged first by doctors. But then, I mean, if you're hearing it a lot from just people in general, then you just are already feeling judged. So then you're thinking, well, this doctor is probably thinking I'm crazy too.
Yeah. For sure. I will say that if you're feeling judged by your therapist, it's probably time for a new therapist.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
there's our kind of oath, if you will. We don't actually take an oath. Maybe we should. Is, well, first, do no harm.
Yeah.
Right? I think that just in healthcare in general, that's kind of what we're all signing up for. But we have this thing in our industry in therapy called non-judgmental stance. And that is like the pillar of our work is that no matter what you say to me, no matter what we're talking about, there is not judgment in this room. There's no room for it because people just shut down. And then I talk about doing harm. Like now I went to this place that I thought was safe and I spoke up about this thing that was really hard to talk about. And then you like shot me some shady eyes. Like, I'm not going to open up about that again. And now it's for me to live with, like without being able to talk about it. So I would say if judgment is entering the therapy room, people should identify that as out of the norm. And should search for a new therapist where they're not having that experience for sure. And sometimes it takes a couple tries to find the therapist that is right for you. Like it doesn't always happen
right away.
Because at the end of the day, it really is still two humans in a room with different personalities, different. You have your introverts, your extroverts, your talkers, you're not talking. It's like all of that still comes into the therapy room. And the truth of the matter is we have natural, like relational abilities and connection with different types of temperaments. And so it's okay to search for that. I often tell, patients who come to see me when we're doing that initial intake, like I might not be your person. Right. And you can tell me that. I would love to help you find your person. And so I would definitely be your own advocate in therapy. I would give yourself permission. I always say, give it like 3-4 sessions. Like sometimes it just feels awkward because it's the first time you've talked about it and you're not really sure what to expect. But if after like 3-4 sessions, you're like, this is just like I'm not feeling it. Just move on. Move on. And I think if you're with a good provider, even if that's not the person for you, that should be a safe conversation to say like, I just don't think I'm getting what I need out of this. Like, do you have any recommendations? I want somebody who's more directive, or I want somebody who doesn't give me therapy homework or whatever it is. But at the same time, it's hard for a lot of people to advocate that way.
I think it's like, even with doctors, or I even say this as like being a makeup artist, I wasn't everybody's makeup artist. Like I had a few people that were like, I'm going to go a different direction. I would still love to know like what I did. So then I know maybe next time not to do that with whoever. But it feels like such a sensitive, they're sharing their like really sensitive, scary thing. And then they're like, well, great, they didn't listen to me, so now I don't want to do it again.
Talk about it.
Yeah, because then I feel like people think that they're like, well, everybody's just like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so true. Like even I don't even know how many doctors I've been through. But I'm like, I don't like that doctor. I didn't like the way they treated me. I'm not going back. But I still go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because, you know, I need my checkup. I feel like that with therapy, it's like almost having this like checkup kind of.
Yeah. Well,
check
and when
in.
we had our first son, I think we toured through like 4 pediatricians.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I mean, it was our first kid, so I was like high alert.
Yep.
Yeah.
I couldn't put my finger on what it was.
Yeah.
But once we found the right fit, I realized the thing that I was looking for is I needed space and permission to ask questions.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pediatricians we had met with up to that point were just telling me.
Yeah.
They were just telling me what to do. And I think in the spirit of education and trying to help me, they weren't bad doctors. They weren't trying to get me out of their office faster. It was just something I needed. Yep. I needed to be able to ask questions, and I wasn't able to do it with some of those doctors.
Right. And feeling heard, like I'm not being a crazy mom.
Right.
You know, because like sometimes I'll be like, check this. And they're like, okay. Like I mean, just even when Nevaeh was diagnosed with diabetes, we had to advocate for her to be checked for her blood sugars.
Yep.
No one said anything, but we were like, that's what we need.
Yep.
And finally, somebody had listened.
Yep.
So I think being heard is such a big part of therapy without being judged.
True. Yeah.
Is there like a specific thing that you say or are taught to just not? I am a very non-judgmental person. You can tell me I was going to say craziest shit. But then I'm like, maybe I shouldn't say that. You can tell me the wildest stuff. And I'm like, wow. Like, I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's something that you actually teach or that you can be so non-judgmental. You know what I mean? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the academics, right? So you learn a lot about these conditions. So there's a big book called the DSM, and that's got all the different mental illnesses in there. And you read the symptoms, and I had a professor that made us memorize that book, which I'm judgy about that one. That one I'm judgy about.
Listen, I have ADHD. I'd be like, nah.
Because guess what? That book hasn't gone anywhere. It's always been on my shelf, and I can always take it off the shelf to reference it. Anyway, so you learn a lot about. You get a lot of exposure before you're in front of people about the realities of mental illness and the different ways it can present, and so you kind of, when you start to do some of your clinical training, it's not catching you off guard in terms of like, whoa.
Right.
So you're like really having thoughts of like hurting yourself.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Like you kind of go in and they teach you like when you're doing a clinical interview, here are the elements that you need to touch on. Mm-hmm. And it's, in every clinical interview, you have to ask, or you should ask about hallucinations and auditory hallucinations, and you should ask about gambling behavior. Like you need to ask about what would maybe be considered taboo questions in general conversation with people.
Yeah.
And so you get kind of the slow exposure to it. But there is a process for every therapist of, I think, working on the non-judgmental part, but it's less than like, most people who go into this field are helpers by nature. Mm-hmm. And it's the intensity of some of what you hear. Yeah. That can actually be the jarring experience. It's not so much like judging the other person. It's hearing their life story, because a lot of things can impact or perpetuate mental illness. And that was the hardest part for me in my clinical training was I chose to take a career path that was more towards underserved populations and trauma and kids who had really intense experiences through childhood. And it took a long time to, I bet, be able to just absorb that story.
So then do you go to therapy?
I have. I think every therapist should go to therapy.
Because I'm like, I would feel like I would need to go to therapy after doing therapy.
You have a lot of supervision. So I was supervised for that whole 5 years that I was in school. And then an additional year after I finished my doctorate, you're supervised again. So you get to process a whole bunch of stuff in supervision. And that's where you get to kind of work through some of like, that seemed really odd. Mm-hmm. Like, I think even for that diagnosis, this is like really intense or like out of the norm. And you get to figure out, back to the question about like OCD, for example,
Mhm.
Like a lot of people will self-identify themselves as OCD, but the condition itself is actually very specific of like, you need to have two very core elements, which is you are experiencing obsessive thoughts, meaning they're incredibly intrusive. They get in the way of your day. You can't shake them. And then you pair it with this compulsion. And the theory kind of working in your brain is that if I do this thing, then nothing bad will happen.
Do you have that?
Mm-hmm.
I have that about, not bad, but like, it's stupid stuff. I don't even want to talk about it. It's so dumb. I'm like,
well, so there's like
I'm
superstitions.
It's like I'm very superstitious about certain things. And it's like, it's stupid stuff like putting my right sock on first. I have to have my socks matching. If I don't put my right sock on this is so dumb. If I don't put it on I feel like I'm going to have a whole bad day. So I could never do my left foot first. When I had contacts, it was always my right eye. And then because I always felt like I was there goes my whole entire day if I did it wrong.
Yeah. Go back to bed.
Yeah.
Well, and I think
Ethan's sitting here like,
yes,
I have all of that.
All of the things.
Yes.
We have appointments at Minnesota Mental Health.
Ethan.
Over here registering online.
I think, well, and truthfully, I think a lot of us have quirks like that, right? And I think there's superstition. There's this concept of like magical thinking where I sometimes go to this space where I think I actually am controlling the outcome of the universe or something. Like I'll notice this with that, like my kids' sporting events or something where we all have those same superstitions of if this, then they're going to win the game or they're going to lose the game or like, right?
Yeah.
But there's a core feature when you're looking at is something truly a mental health condition and there has to be functional impairment, which means like it interrupts your day. Like it is getting in the way and probably in more than one environment. So it's getting in the way at home and at work or socially and at home or at school and, you know, with my friends and with my parents or whatever it is. But we have to see that element of functional impairment because otherwise we really shouldn't be calling it a mental health condition or a mental illness. It might just be how we've adapted to the world. And I think we can all have habits that are maybe not our most adaptive traits.
Yeah.
But we probably can coach ourselves out of it. Right. So if you put your left sock on first and Ethan and you were like, there goes my day. Like we should probably just shut her down right now. And Ethan was like, came over and was like, hey, Court, like, let's break this down. Yeah. Like, do we really think that the order by which you put your socks on is going to change the outcome of the day? You could probably get to that place in your brain of like, that does sound a little different. Yeah. And like, maybe I'm willing to challenge my own theory. Right. And that's how we can separate, you know, it not being a condition that then prevents you from actually like being able to live your life. Right. Whereas if we're going to diagnose something like an OCD, those who truly have that condition, it's very, it interrupts a lot of their day. And it can be very challenging to live with.
I'm going to start waking you up, putting your sock on the opposite foot.
Let me know your triggers and then
so I'm just gonna
poke you.
Exposure therapy is one of the techniques with OCD, and it's kind of pushing through that thing that we think is gonna, you know, a lot of people or like phobias, for example, you can get some exposure therapy where like people like terrified of spiders, right? No. And so like you in therapy you
put
like
them in a box with spiders.
You don't you just start in the room by talking about spiders and regulating your emotions while you talk about spiders. And we're going to take out a picture of spider. We're going to look at the picture while we're regulating our emotions. And then it's
scary. Yeah. Okay, I have some other questions. Right. Okay, since we talked about OCD, let's talk about ADHD. Yeah. And why is it? I have so many questions about this. But so why is it easier for Nevaeh when she got diagnosed? She was 10 or something.
Yeah.
It was. Like it seemed like her tutor was like, I really think she has ADHD. She can't focus.
Yeah.
Whatever. And then we took her to the doctor. Her other teacher signed off on it. We did. And
we had to answer like a form that had a bunch of questions. And then they diagnosed her and she had meds like that week. Day.
But me to get diagnosed, because after she was diagnosed, I was like, then really looking into it. And I'm like, wow, I definitely also do. Like all the traits that she has, I also have.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, why is it harder for an adult to get diagnosed and like than a kid and navigating all of that?
Yeah, I think a couple reasons. So unfortunately, we've seen a pattern where there was pretty relaxed prescribing for kids. Like, I don't remember how long ago this was. It was probably a good, I don't know, 7-10 years ago. So it would be interesting to know what it's at right now. But I remember reading that on average, it took a primary care physician 8 minutes with a kid to prescribe Ritalin.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Too relaxed.
Yeah.
8 minutes. Yeah.
Especially because, one of the things, and I'll tell a lot of patients that I work with this, is regardless of the mental illness that you're experiencing, depression, anxiety, OCD, a lot of times, two of the first things to go are your sleep and your attention, right? So people who are highly anxious have a lot of attention, like a lot of difficulty attending to things and concentrating on things and focusing. People who are depressed, same thing. And so for us to take attention and concentration issues at face value is probably irresponsible of us. We should be digging in a little bit more.
Yeah.
So now we have some screeners that have come out. You can, parents and even adults themselves can weigh in on their symptoms to try and get a little bit more in depth to it. And then you can take it a step farther, which is like a full psychological evaluation where we're doing like cognitive measures. We're doing a lot more behavioral screeners. And then there are some tests that are actually measuring your ability to attend. And so that psychological evaluation is really hard to get because the only trained professional you can go to is a clinical psychologist. So for therapy, we have both master's level clinicians and doctoral level clinicians. So like some of the credentials you'll see for a master's level clinicians is like an LPCC, a licensed professional clinical counselor, an LMFT, which is marriage and family therapy, LICSW is social work. And those, they all have advanced training in therapy. But one of the reasons my schooling was so long is because it was learning both therapy and assessment. Right?
Gotcha.
So that first appointment, you go to therapy. It's called an intake or a diagnostic assessment, right? It's a more thorough review of your history. They're going to ask about your childhood. They're going to ask about all sorts of different mental health conditions. And it's a pretty thorough interview, but it's not a psychological evaluation. Psychological evaluation, you're going to have like tests, like an IQ test or something like that.
Oh.
And so a lot of people will go to their doctor and say, I think I have ADHD, because we know that my experience has been that we're not so quick to give out, especially stimulant medication, because we know that there can be some habit forming elements to that. And so in order to make sure that it's ADHD, a lot of primary care physicians will say, I want you to go get an evaluation first.
Yeah.
Right. And where the disconnect happens sometimes is then somebody went to their primary care physician, then they call Minnesota Mental Health Clinics and like, my doctor said I need to get an ADHD evaluation. Well, what that means on our end is the full kit and caboodle.
Yeah.
Like the whole test. Well, you can only get those from psychologists, and it's really hard to find psychologists who do that day in and day out. And, there's wait lists, and like sometimes it can be 6 months, 9 months.
The guy that I went to try to get into, he was 6 months.
Yep.
And then like the week before your appointment was like, sorry, I can't. That something came up, like family something, and then it was going to be like another couple months.
Yeah. And I was like, but he was the only guy who did it.
Yeah.
So
it's hard to find people.
Yeah.
And really, a lot of times what primary care physicians are trying to say is like, I want you to consult with somebody who is in the specialty of mental health to do some checks and balances around.
Got it.
Is what you're experiencing around attention and concentration more than likely, or very confidently in some cases, just through an interview and some questionnaires, like diagnostically consistent with ADHD, or if the person comes to me and, discloses this whole long history of chronic trauma and, other associated anxiety symptoms or something with that, like I would probably be like, we need more testing to confidently say that this is ADHD versus something else. And so, sometimes I would encourage people to ask a question back to their primary care physician. So when you say you want me to get an evaluation, are you asking that I get cognitive testing done? Are you asking that I go see a psychologist and get they call it a full battery of testing? Or are you wanting me to consult with a mental health professional, which could be master's or doctorate? Do you want me to consult with a mental health professional to just get diagnostic clarity, just to be clear on like which category of diagnosing are we narrowing in on? And then I think you'll understand the intentions of your doctor a little bit more, and then you're on the same page, right? Because a lot of doctors can be like, I just want you to go talk to a therapist about this and see if that's what it really is. In which case, those appointments are much more readily available because we have more providers who can provide them. Right. And it can go quicker.
Okay. That's I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But the actual therapist cannot give a clinical diagnosis of ADHD, correct?
You can with the right history, with the right like behavioral markers. Like sometimes it's just very clear.
Yeah.
It's just very, very clear.
Yeah.
Other times the water's a little muddy. And like sometimes in that you're still making a judgment call where you're saying like more than likely this is ADHD. If the water gets like way too muddy, then we need the full battery.
The full battery.
Full battery.
Okay. So for my last question, a lot of people wanted to know like how to deal with ADHD without meds, like best kind of tests, and then kind of, I don't know, medication versus without or both, and kind of, I guess ADHD I would like to hear about.
Yeah.
Do you get, if you have OCD, do you get, do they
there are
give
meds for that?
There is? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. There's medications for, I would say, the majority of mental health conditions. The level of effectiveness, I think, are very personal to the person. And sometimes it's kind of a long road to find the one that works for you, and getting the dosing correctly. And I think if you're kind of have tried 1 or 2 or 3 meds and you're working with your primary care physician, that might be a clue to maybe go see a psychiatrist who's like the specialist, right?
Yeah.
So similarly, like you go to your pediatrician when your kiddo has like their first ear infection, maybe their second ear infection, then it's like off to the ENT you go.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of similar concept where if feel like we're not quite getting this figured out, it's okay to ask for a referral to a psychiatrist, or a lot of places, like, for example, you can call up Minnesota mental health clinics and just go direct. You don't need a referral from your primary care physician. Every clinic does a little bit different. But in terms of effective treatment, we've shown therapy alone is effective. We've shown medication alone is effective for most conditions. And the one that packs the most punch is therapy with medication.
Combo.
Yep. I would say if you're choosing to start medication to help your anxiety or depression, your ADHD, whatever it is, I would recommend you also start therapy. Different though. I do think there's a lot of reason and a lot of people who can experience symptom relief by starting with therapy and waiting out to see if they need the medication. Sometimes that medication is about, how much is it impairing functioning? Can you still get to work and still kind of do your job? And it's not deteriorating your whole life, right? So we might be able to allow these therapeutic techniques. The goal is always like least invasive, right? That's everything in the medical model is like, let's try and treat this in the least invasive way possible. So if we can do this surgery as a 1-day outpatient surgery, let's do that instead of you stay at the hospital for 3 days,
Yeah.
And similarly, if we can help you with your anxiety, or if we can help you with some techniques to increase your attention and your concentration, those things are very real, very effective, and we don't ever need the meds. Like, well, great. It's a great thing. But sometimes, every person's case is a little bit different. And I think the important takeaway is they're both resources.
Yeah.
I personally would recommend, if you're going to start the meds, I'm probably biased. I would start the therapy with it.
Yeah.
Do you think with adding in, and I don't know if there's any data behind this, but with, as opposed to jumping somebody directly to, say, a stimulant, have there been benefit, or have you seen benefit, or is there any data on if you combined therapy with, say, a non-stimulant, could that be potentially more effective than, because obviously stimulants have their
for ADHD
side effects. Yeah, for ADHD.
Yeah. I think it's all on the table.
Yeah.
Right. And I think like in that situation, the therapy with the non-stimulant, like some of what could even be impacted there is just like the nervousness of being on a stimulant, right? Especially if you come from a family where there's maybe a lot of addiction in your family, like just the act of taking,
you know, my
stimulants.
parents both met at drug rehab.
Yeah.
There you go.
They sure did.
It's as good a place as any.
I mean, listen.
A natural
Immediate
connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. A shared experience. I mean, I think we actually see that a lot in the world of addiction where it's the one space of our field where actually those in recovery are part of the treatment model in like residential treatment facilities.
Yeah.
Like if you've been sober for like 2 years, you can come back and lead groups and all these things. I won't go down that rabbit hole.
That'll be on our next podcast.
Yeah. So, but yeah, with non-stimulants and therapy, there's so many behavioral techniques that can be helpful with executive functioning.
Suppose it's like so personal.
Yeah.
Like each person.
And I think it's about using real life examples and like making it come to light in your life. Like, here's how we can adjust your morning routine.
Yeah.
Or here's what little tips and tricks that work for you, and testing that out. And if at the end of it, it's like, it's not working, then maybe it's a conversation about meds. And then if you start with the non-stimulants, because that feels like the better choice for you.
Right.
And it's still not working, like, okay, let's do a medication trial with stimulants. Like, some of this is about reminding yourself that, you know, as the patient, you have every right to advocate for what's working and not working for you. And you should be going back to your provider and saying, that is not.
Right.
That's not the combo.
Yeah.
That's not, whether that's your therapist, your psychiatrist, whatever it is, you should speak up about that, because a lot of people don't. And, you know, with meds, for example, it can be really helpful for some people going into it with the mindset of a trial. I'm going to do a medication trial. I'm going to, for 1 month, 2 months, whatever it is, it's going to be a set of time. And then I'm going to intentionally have a conversation with my provider about whether it's working, not working, working enough, whether I'm having side effects of that, and just thinking of it as a trial.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I say, you can always go ask questions, and they can write you as many prescriptions as they want to, and it does not mean you have to take any of those meds.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, if you just want to have the conversation, ask questions, get educated on what options are out there.
Is there a way, because I know people have a lot of anxiety about saying to a doctor, like, it's not working.
Yeah.
I always have been like pretty good at that, been like, I don't like this. But my best friend is like, I have anxiety about telling my doctor I have anxiety, which she shares that all the time. And then even switching her meds, she was like, I'm nervous to tell her. I'm like, but she wants you to be just as happy as you should be. So like, you telling her is not going to hurt her
she's not going to be offended.
Is there a way to just say it?
Write it down. Is what I always tell. This is where, like, if you had a therapist, you could talk about your anxiety about telling your doctor that you're anxious in therapy.
There you go.
But I will often, and sometimes we'll use therapy time for this. Let's write down the 3 things that you want to tell your psychiatrist, because those appointments are also shorter. They're very fast. They're throwing a lot of information at you. And it's to nobody's fault. It's just like, they're short appointments and there's a lot to cover. And so sometimes it can feel like there's not room for questions. But again, you're the patient here. And they want what's best for you. So like, push for the time. And if you don't get your questions answered in a way that you feel comfortable starting the meds, you can always follow up, leave a voicemail. Medical messaging is a thing, you know. But I do see a lot of patients have more success in their psychiatry appointments if they just kind of write down, like, these are the 3 things I want to make sure they know.
That's a good point, because I will have questions, but then I forget my questions.
Oh, yeah.
When you're sitting there and I'm like, da-da, and then I leave and I'm like,
wait a second.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to side effects or just like your general feeling. I'm a big proponent too of like tracking your mood, because we often don't see our own patterns, right? So there's a bunch of apps out there that are really good for, you can even just like in the app store, like Mood Tracker, but honestly, like just a calendar. And you can make it simple, like 1 through 10, how anxious was I today? If anxiety is your predominant, you know, kind of concern. And then if you start meds, just put a little star on that day and then keep tracking and see if it actually comes down. And if it's not coming down, like, then that med probably isn't working.
Right.
You know,
it's a good call.
Yeah.
Okay. So for Minnesota Health,
Mhm.
Do you guys have it online where you can find, if we put it in the thing in the description,
Yeah.
where you could find a therapist, make an
100%.
appointment virtually, or how does that work?
Yeah. So you can go right to the website. We have it where we try to help you highest probability that the first match is the right match, right?
Yeah.
So you can even put things in there if like location matters to you, if an in-person versus a virtual appointment matters to you. You can put the thing you're concerned about, like, I think I have anxiety.
Yeah.
Right?
ADHD.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And then it'll kind of, it'll show you a list of providers, and you can kind of see, the description, like the biography of that provider, their educational background, things like that. And it'll put it in the order of the most matches based on what you've responded. And then, you can direct schedule online. You can call the clinic.
You put your insurance. How does that
Yep.
work
So when
too?
you go to make an appointment, our team does the insurance verification to let you know like what's covered, what's not.
Cool.
Most major insurance companies are giving pretty good coverage for mental health now, but not all.
Yeah.
So it's always good to check.
So you don't have to be in Minnesota?
You do have to be in
You do have
Minnesota.
to be in
Yeah.
Minnesota.
Those are some of the licensing rules.
Okay.
So whatever state you're in, your provider has to be licensed in that state.
Got it.
So there's some movement in our industry. They're called compacts. And so like for my degree, for example, there's an agreement, I think it's up to like 35, 38 states or something, where I went through a process of getting my credentials verified and like all my transcripts and test scores and all of this thing. And then so that I then could practice across state lines.
Oh,
But
cool.
every degree is at a different stage of that. And so from a organizational standpoint, like from Minnesota Mental Health Clinic's standpoint, it's still a bit hard to like operationalize that. Like, how do we know where person A and person B are, and that license covers that state, and they have an LPCC. So like Wisconsin is in or Wisconsin's out. Like, and so I think the field will go in that direction eventually, where we'll have a lot more mobility which is huge, because there are some specialties like OCD, I would argue, is a bit of a specialty in our industry. And so finding a specialist, somebody who's chosen to focus their career on that population, that might be in Minnesota, or it might not.
Yeah.
Right. And so it opens up a lot of access for people. So eventually, but for right now, I will say we have 11 locations, and with the addition of telehealth that we now have for mental health, we can reach every corner of the state, which is good.
That's awesome. I was just going to ask you how many locations you had, because I think it's important. Like we talked about, it might not be your first therapist. It might be your third or fourth. I think we're on our fourth, and we love her.
Yes. We've been with her for years now.
Yeah. But having multiple locations, having a virtual option, having those filters when they go online and fill out, can eliminate having potentially to bounce around to multiple therapists before you find the right one. So I think it's important not to just go. Obviously, there's going to be standalone therapy locations that are probably great and that fit certain people, but to have a company like Minnesota Mental Health that has multiple locations, and you can kind of filter out and get yourself to the right spot without having to jump to multiple locations.
Right.
If any of that made sense.
Yeah,
it does.
Sure did.
And one thing because I lead a lot of our our clinical team, and one of the things that I'll say that we do very differently, and I'm a really big advocate, and it goes back to the very first question of like people feeling judged in therapy. Therapy is a really interesting space of healthcare where confidentiality is so paramount, right? Like we have laws that prevent us from sharing information without all the right legal consents in place. And part of that is because it's so important to the process, that confidentiality. The tricky part that it creates, though, is that, so when you're training new psychologists or therapists, when you're learning the technique, a lot of times that door shuts, and like the only two people who know what happened in that room are the patient and the provider, and the only account that you often get from it is from the patient or the provider, which comes through a certain lens or a certain perspective. And so I'm a really big advocate for measuring quality in our field and holding ourselves as mental health professionals accountable to the highest standard of care in this field. And so what that looks like at Minnesota Mental Health Clinics is like our trainees have to do live supervision, which means we will, with the consent of the patient, we will have either a supervisor join the telehealth session, like in the background, can't see me, but I'm at least watching, observing, and seeing what is happening,
Mm-hmm.
or doing recordings or things like that
Yeah.
in like a very safe, secure way. But unless somebody is there and viewing it,
Yeah.
you how else would you know?
Right.
We also have taken a lot of time to put like some data sets together. So how often are clients coming back to see you? How long are their treatment episodes? Is that consistent with evidence-based care? And if not, why not? Let's do more training. Let's do more supervision. Because my goal is that everybody who comes to Minnesota mental health clinics knows with absolute certainty that they're getting high quality care.
Yeah.
And even if that therapist is not the therapist for you,
Yeah.
I can sleep at night because I know no harm was done.
Right.
Right. Because we're watching it.
I have one question before we leave.
Yeah.
And we might not. Did you ever watch the Menendez brothers thing?
Mm-hmm.
And
I watched it on Netflix or something, right?
Yes.
They have a documentary.
and the therapist that blackmailed them.
I was horrified.
I was like, oh, I got to get her opinion on that.
Yeah.
Horrified.
Can you imagine?
No.
I'm like, that man, he recorded them.
Yep.
And then the wife told, and then they went and got the tapes. I can't even believe it.
I mean, like for everybody listening,
Yeah.
unless you signed a piece of paper that gave permission for any type of recording,
Yes.
it should never enter the therapy room.
Yeah.
That
You
is-
would know you signed it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ethan and I actually, our therapist, we had a couple that were recorded because she was doing it
Mhm.
for, I don't know, I can't remember, but it was like
Well, I think
some
when we
sort of
first started
training
with
thing.
her, she was still in her
Supervision.
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
internship or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So if you see, man, what a shit show that was.
Yeah.
Like, good
Yeah.
Lord. So no recordings, you guys, unless you're signing something.
Sign the paper.
Yeah.
Well,
Sign the paper.
yeah, you don't have to sign the paper, but
If you don't sign the paper, you sue them.
for sure. And report them to their licensing board.
Yes.
Please.
Immediately.
Immediately.
should we end with like a crazy story,
Do you have a she can't
like a shorter
Sarah,
one?
she
I
can't-
know she can't
You
share.
can't say crazy.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I have a wild story.
A wild.
Ethan.
Megan, do you have a wild story? Obviously, you can't share names,
I
but
can't share names. My favorite, the wildest thing that ever happened to me in this field is I showed up to work, and I worked at a residential treatment facility. So very intense cases.
yeah,
And I look back and I laugh. They like my office. I was so proud of it, but it was like in the basement, and I think I could touch both walls by holding my arm.
Oh
It was
my
like all
gosh.
cinder block, but they
Yeah.
painted it purple, like for me.
Oh.
And I was like, oh,
Nice.
nice. And I checked
Oh,
my
nice.
voicemails. They're like, Megan, the Secret Service is here to see you. And I was like, that's new.
what?
That's
yeah.
scary.
It
was it scary?
it was intimidating.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you know, out of all the entities in this world that like, it's like, who do I not want to know my name? It's
Yeah.
like probably the Secret Service.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, what's going to come out of that?
Yeah.
But it was fine. They are exactly what you think. Ray-Bans, black
Really?
cars, khakis.
Wow.
Yeah.
Little wire trickling down.
Yeah.
An
Yeah.
earbud and
Yeah.
hey, Megan.
I didn't have to,
Hold on.
I was under supervision still, so
Mm.
I didn't have to encounter that on my own. And it was,
I would
you know,
Just-
I'm very glad that the Secret Service is taking seriously what is said on the internet. That's
Yeah.
what I will say about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Good.
Yeah, it was probably worthy of a, you know,
A
a
visit.
follow-up.
A follow-up.
In my estimation, it also wasn't a very real
Oh.
situation. So it was
Mm.
a little, you could get we all had a good chuckle
Yeah.
I
over
bet.
it when it's all said and done.
I
But
bet.
that was probably the
Wildest.
wildest,
The wildest
story I
story.
have in my repertoire.
That's a good one.
That is
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have you on again. We have
Love
way
it.
more
Yeah.
to go into.
potentially
I feel
every few months or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really should.
Keep with the AMA.
Yeah.
Like, I love to talk about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I like listening and learning. I think
Mhm.
it's very important, and more awareness, the better for
Yeah,
everybody,
Absolutely.
right?
for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's why we
Mhm.
started the whole podcast, was just to bring awareness
Yep.
to whatever, mental health, cancer,
Mm-hmm.
suicide, anything
Mhm.
like that. So
All the things.
we appreciate you coming on,
Yeah.
Megan, and
Yeah.
sharing
Yeah.
your expertise, and we learned a lot. I'm sure the viewers will
Yeah.
as well.
For sure.
And obviously it's May. It's Mental Health Month.
Mental Health Awareness
Month.
But we should always be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Aware.
Every month should be
Every
Mental
month.
Health Awareness Month.
I agree.
And I apologize to everybody for taking the word crazy out of your vocabulary.
Yep. Sorry. I mean, now I'm like, now I hear it. I'm like, oh, I say that.
I'm really not sorry, actually.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. 100%.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
We'll see you in our next one, guys. Bye.